I didn't invite my stepmom to my wedding because she bullied me for years, so my dad said he wouldn't come either. I told him not to bother. I am 25 years old, and I am marrying my high school sweetheart, Caleb, who is also 25. When we sat down to create the guest list, we agreed it would be immediate family only. That meant my mother and father, but not January. It was an easy call. She has never been kind to me. Inviting her would only add stress, and honestly, I knew she would try to cause problems. Jan came into the picture when I was in 8th grade. My parents divorced when I was very young, and I spent equal time with both of them. Half the month with my mom, half with my dad. It was a setup that worked well for me. I never felt like I was being shuffled back and forth, I just got to enjoy both sides of my family. Over time, both my parents dated other people, but none of those relationships lasted long enough to matter to me. That changed when my dad started seeing January. I was in 6th grade when they got serious, and the first time I met her, she was friendly. I remember thinking she was nice. But that did not last. Her attitude shifted quickly. She became cold and dismissive, and it was not long before I started to feel like she resented my presence. I am not saying everyone has to love kids, but there is a basic level of decency you owe them, and she had none. I became anxious around her, never knowing when she would lash out. I tried to avoid her completely. At first, it was little things, eye rolls, sighs, looks of irritation. I made myself as quiet and invisible as possible. But after she and my dad got engaged, it got worse. She would insult me outright, usually when my father was not around. After the wedding, she did not even bother hiding it. She went out of her way to make my life miserable, and my dad stood by and watched. The worst part was how he never defended me. He acted like Jan and I were two people who simply did not get along, as if I shared equal blame. But I was a kid, and she was a grown woman. Still, he would tell me to try harder or make excuses for her. He said she was just concerned and did not mean to be hurtful. That was his way of avoiding conflict with her. I might have believed him if I were younger, but I knew better. He was in denial, trying to paint a picture that just was not real. And even now, looking back, I see that he always put his comfort above my well-being. That truth took years to sink in. As a teenager, all I wanted was to keep my connection with him. So, I kept my mouth shut. I tolerated Jan, let her chip away at my confidence, just so I could have some kind of relationship with my father. I hoped, stupidly, that things would get better on their own. I never told my mom how bad things were. I was terrified that if she found out, she would fight for full custody, and then I would lose all contact with my dad. So I put up with it. I kept quiet. I convinced myself I could survive a few bad years until I left for college. Eventually, I stopped complaining to my dad altogether. I was scared he might think I was too much trouble and walk away. And a part of me worried Jan might convince him to give up custody. I felt like I had no power in that house, so I tried to disappear into the background. My childhood at my father's place was hard. But somehow, I made it through. I still called and visited him even after I moved out. You could say I was loyal to a fault. I was clinging to the hope that he might see me as his daughter again, not just someone who disrupted his new life. Jan continued to make things unbearable through high school. I became quiet, withdrawn, not at all like the person I had been. But I kept my head down and focused on the finish line, college. I knew that once I moved out, her grip on my life would loosen. When the time came, I packed my bags and left. I was heading to college out of state, which was the best thing that could have happened. I finally had distance. I only had to come back for major holidays, and I could usually stay with my mom during those visits. That let me stay in touch with my father while avoiding Jan as much as possible. It was a tricky balance to manage, but I did it. I kept things civil and made sure not to upset anyone enough to burn bridges. Even after college, once I had my own job, I continued trying to maintain some kind of bond with my dad. And Jan? She just got worse. Older, meaner, more bitter. She still took shots at me whenever she could, but I stopped reacting. That seemed to make her even more aggressive. Then came the breaking point. I went to see my dad for lunch, and Jan started in on me again. I snapped. We had a huge blowout fight, loud, ugly, and long overdue. That was about 3 years ago. After that, my dad stopped inviting me over when she was home. I think he finally accepted that the two of us would never get along, and that it was better to keep us apart if he wanted to see me at all. From that point on, we only met at restaurants or on days when he knew Jan would not be around. It was odd, but honestly, I felt relieved. I no longer had to brace myself for her insults or her strange obsession with turning everything into a power struggle. That woman hated me for no reason. Or maybe just because she could. It felt like she enjoyed having someone to torment. And if she really saw me as a threat, she would have tried to get rid of me. But no, she wanted me around so she could pick me apart piece by piece. Around the same time, I started dating Caleb. A few months into the relationship, I thought it was time he met my parents. So I invited them to a birthday dinner at my apartment. Everyone got along just fine. Jan was not there, of course. We were still not speaking, and I had no plans to change that. She knew nothing about Caleb, and honestly, that felt right to me. Caleb and I got engaged recently and started planning the wedding. Jan never crossed my mind. She had not spoken to me in over 3 years and had never once tried to patch things up. Why would I consider inviting her? Then we sent out the invitations, and my dad called. He said Jan was offended not to receive one. But we were keeping the guest list tight, no plus ones, no distant relatives, just the people closest to us. It was obvious she was not welcome. I do not even know why she thought she would be invited. She was not at our engagement party, which was very public. Photos were everywhere. Even if I had her blocked, others surely told her. My dad definitely knew. If she had wanted to be there, she had every chance to reach out and apologize. But she never did. So why should I include her now? Still, my dad insisted that she should be there. Said it was only right because she was his wife. I told him I disagreed. We have been going back and forth about it ever since. There was no way I could invite Jan to my wedding. Letting her be there would send the message that I saw her as part of my family, and that just was not true. My father and I had been going back and forth on this for several days. Then, just yesterday, he laid it out plain: if Jan was not welcome, then he would not be coming either. He said it was insulting that his wife would be excluded from a major family event like this. I could hardly believe he said that. He had never once tried to mend things between Jan and me after our falling out, and now he was acting like I was the one being unreasonable. I figured Jan was stirring this up on purpose. She likes chaos, especially when it is not about her. Probably saw my wedding as the perfect opportunity to make everything about herself. That part did not surprise me. What did surprise me was that my father let her do it. He could have shut it down. He could have told her straight that, after how she treated me for most of my life, she had no right to expect an invitation. But instead of taking my side, he turned the blame on me. I had hoped, maybe foolishly, that our fight a few years ago had changed things. I thought my dad was finally starting to understand the damage Jan caused and how much I had put up with to keep a relationship with him. I thought maybe he had grown. But last night proved I was wrong. He had not changed at all. He was still putting her ahead of me, like he always had. So I made my choice. I told him not to come. I told him I was pulling his invitation and that, honestly, neither he nor Jan deserved to be at my wedding. That conversation hurt more than I can explain, but it needed to happen. I also told him something I had never said out loud before, that he was not just complicit in Jan's cruelty, he was responsible for allowing it. She might have been the one who insulted me, belittled me, made me feel like garbage, but he stood by and let it happen. He never once stepped in to protect me. That kind of silence speaks volumes. I told him that I was done. That if he could not stand up for me after all these years, then I did not want him there on my wedding day or in my life moving forward. I ended the call and went straight to Caleb. I needed to tell someone what had happened. I was second-guessing myself, wondering if I had overreacted, if I had just cut ties for no good reason. But deep down, I already knew the answer. I had always hoped that one day, my father would open his eyes and realize how toxic Jan had been. That he would finally step up. But that was never going to happen. And I had to face that truth. After that call, I heard nothing from my dad. Not a text. Not a phone call. Nothing. But other people did reach out, his relatives. They flooded me with messages, telling me how ungrateful I was, how disappointed they were in me, how I had embarrassed the family. They said I owed my father an apology. But for what? For finally standing up for myself? They acted like my father was some kind of saint. The man who raised me, paid for my education, gave me a roof over my head. They kept throwing that in my face. As if doing the bare minimum as a parent gave him a free pass to ignore the fact that I had spent years being bullied in his house. I never said I was not thankful for the things my dad did for me. Of course I was. But parenting is not a favor, it is a responsibility. You do not get a lifetime of loyalty just because you did what you were supposed to do when your kid was young. Besides, I made sacrifices too. I stayed silent. I tolerated January. I let her stomp all over my childhood just so I would not lose my father completely. That is what no one seems to remember. That she was cruel, and he let it happen. That I was scared of her growing up, and he never once asked why. Everyone knew. His entire side of the family saw what was going on. And they all pretended it was nothing. The only time it became a problem was when I pushed back. The only people who supported my decision were Caleb and my mother. They both told me I was doing the right thing. That gave me some peace. Still, I keep thinking about it. Was I too harsh? Am I cutting off my dad for good over this? I do not know. That is why I am telling this story. I want to know if I was wrong for telling my father not to come to my wedding because he insisted on bringing January. I just could not let her be there, not after everything she had done. So, am I in the wrong here? Update 1. I read every single comment after my last post, and I came to a clear decision: I am cutting my father off for good. Looking back, it is wild how much I tolerated just to keep some sort of relationship with him. The more I think about it, the more I realize he never truly valued me. No matter how much I tried, it was never enough. It is a tough pill to swallow. He is my father. I am his only daughter. And he still chose to stand by while his wife treated me like garbage. He never defended me. Never once stepped in. And now I have to accept that he just does not care the way a father should. The good news is, I am not going through this alone. Caleb and my mother have had my back from the start. They are helping me navigate all the emotions that come with letting go of someone I tried so hard to hold on to. What makes things worse is how my father's family keeps blowing up my phone. They want to remind me of all the wonderful things he did for me while I was growing up. They say I should be grateful. But the truth is, most of what they praise him for, paying for school, putting food on the table, being present, is what any decent parent is supposed to do. That does not make him exceptional. That makes him a parent. I have not responded to any of their messages. Not because I am avoiding it, but because it is hard to take. These are people who watched me grow up. People who knew what was going on and stayed silent. And now they are trying to guilt me into giving my father a pass just to protect his image. They do not understand I am done playing that game. I meant what I said. He either admits he failed me and tries to make it right, or he stays out of my life. I am not asking him to divorce January. As much as I would love to never see that woman again, I am not even pushing for that. All I asked for was an apology. Just a real, honest moment where he owned up to what he did and how he failed me. But even that was too much for him. What I see now is that he is more concerned with looking like a good guy than actually being one. He wants credit for things he never earned. I had convinced myself he was still a decent man deep down, someone who just made mistakes. But any father who watches his wife torment his daughter for years and does nothing about it, that is not a decent man. That is not someone I owe anything to. So no, I am not being ungrateful. I am finally standing up for myself. Update 2. The wedding is coming up fast, and it has now been a full month since I last spoke to my father. His side of the family backed off after a few days of trying to guilt me. Eventually, they all stopped calling. I guess that means they gave up, or maybe they just cut me off altogether. Either way, it is fine. I am actually relieved. Better to know where people stand now than find out during the wedding. I have been so buried in planning and work that I almost forgot about the fight with my dad. But the other day, out of nowhere, he showed up at my house. I did not see it coming. I let him in. I always do. No matter how upset I am, I still cannot bring myself to shut the door on either of my parents. Maybe that is a weakness. I do not know. But that is how I am wired. I thought he had come to apologize. I gave him the benefit of the doubt for a few seconds, anyway. That is not what happened. He stayed for a while, almost 3 hours, and we had a long talk. He admitted something I never thought he would, that Jan had been cruel, and he had looked the other way. He said he avoided standing up to her because he did not want to deal with the blowback. Hearing him admit it felt surreal. For years, his approach had been to blame me or pretend the problems were not real. And for a while, I believed it. I really thought I was the problem. I convinced myself that if I just tried harder, she would stop. But that never worked. Even after he acknowledged the truth, he still refused to apologize. He said he felt bad, sure, but not bad enough to say he was sorry. He claimed it was the only way he could keep peace in the house, by keeping both Jan and me in his life without rocking the boat. According to him, doing nothing was the easiest way to keep things normal. But that is not how it works. He had a choice. He chose the path of least resistance. And in doing that, he let me suffer. He let his wife bully me because standing up to her was too much work. I never pushed back because I loved him, and I did not want to lose him. He used that against me. At the end of the conversation, he said he wanted to be part of my life again. He even mentioned going to therapy together. But then he followed that up with the same condition: he would not come to the wedding if Jan was not invited. She was hurt, he said. She expected me to move on and let the past go. And he had already promised her he would not attend if she was excluded. Apparently, Jan had no idea he was even visiting me that day. She is still against us having any kind of relationship. When I was a kid, she tolerated it because she thought it was important for him to feel like a dad. But now that I am an adult, she sees no need for us to stay close. That logic is ridiculous. And the fact that my father buys into it, that he still lets her set the rules, is exhausting. He has made his choice. I am not his priority. Jan is. That much is clear. We had a long, emotional talk, but it ended with nothing resolved. I do not think I can keep pretending that anything is going to change. I have to protect myself from here on out. Update 3. It has been a while since my last update, and I wanted to share where things stand. Caleb and I are officially married. We had the kind of ceremony we always dreamed about: simple, meaningful, surrounded by the people who truly love us. My dad was not there. And even though a part of me hoped he would come around at the last minute and show up, I knew deep down it was not going to happen. He made his choice. In one of my previous updates, I mentioned that he and I had agreed to start working on our relationship. That we were considering therapy. None of that happened. After our conversation, we stayed in touch for maybe 2 days. Then he just stopped responding altogether. I kept trying, but he never replied. I got caught up with wedding planning and work and, at some point, stopped trying. I later heard through a couple of relatives that he and Jan moved to the suburbs. That must have been what he was busy with. Still, it is strange that he did not tell me. Strange that he came by to talk, made all these promises, then disappeared.
I am not heartbroken. I am used to being let down by him. But I am not going to let it happen again.
I am done hoping he will be the father I always wanted. It is time to focus on the people who actually care. Caleb and I are heading off on our honeymoon soon, and that is where my energy is going now. My husband, my mother, and the small circle of people who have stood by me, those are the relationships that matter.
That is all I need.